Our next talk is from Gabi Benel. Gabi grew up in New York skiing in the Catskills. He went to Cornell and got a bachelor's and master's in aerospace engineering. He has guided mountains throughout North America and Denali and the Alaska Range. The work he's going to talk about, he did working as part of the snow safety team at Snowmass Ski Patrol. And he's going to talk to us today about deploying airbags. Gabi's work is always driven by curiosity, and he's passionate about learning, teaching, and skiing. Please welcome Gabi.
Thanks, Ethan. Thanks, Ethan. To begin, I'd really like to thank the supporters of this research, the CAIC, the Aspen Ski Company, the American Avalanche Association, especially members of the Snowmass Ski Patrol. They spent a lot of time hauling tripods up and down 40-degree slopes and packing and repacking airbags. So you're welcome, because we got in shape and got really good at using the airbags. So I'll start with a story. On December 23rd in 2021, Brian from the CAIC made this report.
Hi, this is Brian Lazar with the Colorado Avalanche Information Center, and welcome to your weekly Avalanche Outlook. You can see here that we've got generally moderate conditions across all of the state of Colorado. This is going to be the situation for Wednesday and Thursday, and then we are in store for a dramatic change and really markedly increasing avalanche hazard. I'm going to show just an animation here of total snow accumulation starting on Thursday morning and in through the weekend. And you can see starting on Friday morning, heavy snowfall really starts to take hold across the state. Favored areas could see 2 or 3 or more feet of snow by the time the whole storm is done. And this is going to land on a snowpack that has pretty pronounced weak layers.
So a few days later, that forecast came true. Christmas Day in 2021 saw widespread snowfall throughout the state. Most zones went to high danger, and an avalanche warning was issued for the Aspen zone. We got significant for us, snow in Snowmass, with about 7 inches during the day on Friday, and then about that same amount overnight into Saturday morning. We can see that this period was the start of a significant event for this season in our zone, and also I don't think you're allowed to do a presentation for the CAIC without including a SWE chart. So in Snowmass, we had a lot of work to do. We'd been boot packing already for almost 2 months, and we were starting to open more and more terrain. The plan for the day included a lot of explosives work. One area we were working thoroughly was the East Bowl and the East Bowl chutes. The East Bowl chutes and the Green Cabin Cliffs are a series of steep west-facing slopes. They're permanently closed to the public. They sit above a blue run that's accessed from the top of the high alpine lift. That blue run takes a significant amount of snow and a lot of cat work to open because of the rocky nature of the terrain. I'm going to read a little from the accounts of that day. At approximately 9 a.m., 3 patrollers left the Alpine magazine to conduct avalanche hazard mitigation work using explosives and ski cuts in terrain above and adjacent to that upper Green Cabin ski run. They planned on splitting up at the avalanche path named Choker and descending so that a team of 2 could conduct ski cuts and explosive work in the aprons directly above the ski run. Some excerpts from the patroller's narrative. We began placing shots in East Bowl chutes. I had 4 shots with me on that day. I placed my first shot down low, in between the last 2 of the main chutes. It was effective in moving 10 to 20 centimeters of new snow. As we moved down the ridge into the top of Choker, my partner put a shot mid-path into the left side of Choker with similar results as to what we had been seeing. So that patroller then moved out to do some ski cuts, and he continues with his narrative this way. It says, just a few feet into my ski cut, I felt the snowpack collapse, and I suddenly came to a stop with my skis sinking into the snow. Initially, I thought I could just shuffle my feet and step out of the slide, as I had done several times in my past when starting an avalanche with a ski cut. At this point, everything began to happen very fast. However, fortunately, partner 1 began yelling at me to pull my airbag. This was when I realized I was really in trouble, Everything happened so fast after that, the only thing I knew was that I was being buried and could feel the force of the snow covering me. As soon as the snow passed over, I could move my arms enough to clear my face and realize that I was not buried at the bottom of the path, but cemented to a tree. Patroller 3, the one at the top of the ridgeline, recounts the following. Patroller 1 got out on the slope, heard a large whoomph, and said, "Oh, expletive." Patroller 2 saw the snow break just a meter or so above Patroller 1. Patroller 2 yelled at Patroller 1 over and over to pull his airbag until the airbag started to inflate. As the snow stopped, Patroller 2 yelled for Patroller 1, and Patroller 1 yelled, "I'm up." Here's another patroller skiing the neighboring line later in the season. The patroller involved in the avalanche had a knee injury that kept him off skis the rest of the season, but he was able to come back the following year at full capacity. In discussions, he distinctly recalled hearing his partner yelling to pull their airbag, and he hadn't automatically thought to do it right away. Part of his account states, "Due to the fact that I was facing downhill and wrapped around the tree, my airbag created a pocket that protected my face from getting covered up." And I'd just like to ask if we can get better at making this action automatic. This leads us to the motivation for this study. Here are 3 thoughts. In avalanche incident reports, we see some themes come up repeatedly. In this CAIC report, we read, "Skier 2 was wearing an airbag backpack. We determined that the system was functioning properly, the trigger out of the pack strap, but the bag was not deployed." That report continues. It goes on to read that a study on airbag effectiveness found that 60% of non-inflations were due to users not triggering the bag. If you go look up that study and read it more closely, it says non-deployment remains the most considerable limitation to effectiveness. Around 2018, our patrol started to introduce battery-powered airbags. Switching over from compressed gas inflated systems to fan inflated systems removed many of the barriers that kept me from pulling my airbag before. Refilling the bag didn't mean a trip to refill the bottle or replace any O-rings. Repacking the bags was super easy. But most of all, the psychological hurdles were reduced. I started to think, how good am I really at using this device? Finally, an important point I want to make is that I'm not here to argue the usefulness or effectiveness of airbags. This is a tool we use, but if we're going to use this tool, let's get as good as we can at using it. So the setup for this study was fairly simple. We picked a gated run on Snowmass, an inbounds run. The facilitator stood mid-slope with a camera recording at a high frame rate. We gave the skiers a briefing via radio. I'll tell you more about that in a second. And finally, as the skier came down the slope, the facilitator would or would not alert the skier to an avalanche. Then we waited to see what would happen. Some details on the experiment. The participants in this study were all Snowmass patrollers. Decision to use only patrollers was an attempt to control for skiing ability. It would be really interesting in the future to repeat this test with skiers of varying abilities and on different runs. The experiment was conducted on a double black diamond run at Snowmass with a steep entrance and fairly consistent slope with minimal natural obstacles. The briefing that the skiers got when they got to the AMF gate was over radio. From the gate, they couldn't see the ski run. We told them that you're about to ski a backcountry run in unmitigated terrain. Your partner has skied ahead of you and is waiting in a safe zone. And ski it like you mean it. You're not ski cutting. What do we want to gain out of doing this experiment? We wanted to see what happened. What did people do? And how long did it take? So here's what happened. When you see the red exclamation point in this video, that's the moment of alert. In this first sequence, I overlaid 3 separate test runs on one image and synced up the alert time, so you can see how the response time varies between subjects. It's interesting, the different skiers we see all have slightly different approaches to deploying the bag. I don't know if this is something they planned out or thought of before doing this. This next skier did get alerted to an avalanche event, but he didn't pull his bag. This last skier, we could see how the effort to deploy the bag made him get thrown around quite a bit. Here are some data and takeaways from the experiment. 11% failed to deploy. The same percentage stumbled while deploying. None fell while deploying, which was surprising to me. 16% dropped their poles before reaching for the handle. And the vast majority used the opposite hand as the handle side to deploy. The mean time from time of alert to the skier pulling the handle was 3.4 seconds. Following the experiment, participants responded to a series of survey questions. The majority had not deployed an airbag while skiing prior to this exercise. Half found the airbag as hard as they expected to deploy while skiing. Survey question 3 asked, did you learn anything from the experience, anything you would do differently, and any advice for someone going into a similar scenario? Reading through their responses, I gained some insight into experiences I hadn't considered before. Respondent A said, the whole experience was very educational, but I would say the most valuable thing I learned was the required amount of force to deploy the airbag. Their advice to someone would be that you might not hear the airbag deploy, so be sure to use a good amount of force pulling it. Another respondent said, be prepared to have your neck and head pushed forward slightly after it deploys, which will affect your view while skiing. This isn't something I had ever experienced, but looking at the video again, I could definitely see this happening in a bunch of cases. My takeaway message for the group here is what we started with. Practice what we want to be good at. There's no right or wrong way, but you won't know your way until you try. I really encourage you to take this exercise to your home mountain guide service or forecasting group and try it out. I think everyone can take something from this experience. Thanks so much. Thanks.
Thanks, Gabi. That was a super interesting presentation. Any questions for Gabi about this work? Dewey's got a question back there.
All right, am I close to my mouth? All right, here we go. Thank you so much for that talk. This hits home pretty personally, having ridden and pulled a bag and had a buddy hesitate / not find his trigger last season. Real quick, everyone here in the audience, who's pulled your trigger bag? Who's pulled? So those of you who haven't raised your hand, why not? It's really good, as this talk talks about, is pull that trigger, because it's amazing. I had a buddy last season, just anecdotally, go to pull his trigger and literally afterwards be like, I couldn't find it. So if you haven't practiced using the bag, what's it going to do for you when you need it? So thank you. Good talk.
Thank you.
Thank you. Here's a question. Can we get a mic over to that fellow? Thanks, Dylan.
I'm just curious here if you actually got back with the patrollers that didn't pull the airbag, and as to why they didn't pull the airbag, if they gave any insight on that.
The main reason I heard was just like they didn't think of it. It was kind of just overloaded with overloaded, and they just wanted to keep skiing.
I mean, there are other activities where if you need to take a critical step, before you start, I'm right here.
Oh, there you go.
You plan it out. You mentally, like an airplane before you take off. If you lose an engine and you're still at a climb angle, you're going to stall. So you need to make sure that you pitch down so that you don't stall. And so you'll go through a mental review saying, in the event that I lose this engine, I'm going to pitch down immediately so that I don't lose control of the airplane. And that would be something to adapt here before you enter the slope. You know,
Yeah,
this is avalanche terrain. If something goes wrong, if somebody shouts, we're immediately going to pull.
Yeah, that's a
and
great
plan
point.
it out.
I think we talked a lot about, like, a next step for this study would be to talk about educational opportunities. Is there something we could come up, like have people develop a mantra for themselves of while there's, of what they would do in the case of an avalanche to ingrain that behavior. I think it's a tough thing to say because, we go into a slope that we think that if we're skiing it shouldn't avalanche. But I think that one of the main points of this study was to be like, yeah, how can we make this an automatic movement? We practice a ton with our beacons. Can we also practice with this tool?
We have one more question over here, Gabi.
Just a comment, like many educators teach students that there's a checklist they go to at the top of every run. And so for airbags, what I teach is ATOP. So armed, trigger, out, practice pull. And so you look at your buddies, you do yourself, and you practice with both hands, reaching for it. And if you do that at the top of every run, it starts to become muscle memory. And I really agree with your point that electric bags help get rid of the mental blocks and make people actually train with it.
Thanks. Yeah, that's awesome.